Well, the government has been setting out its plans to rebuild the military to prepare for war, accepting all the main recommendations from the Strategic Defence Review. Speaking in the Commons earlier, the Defence Secretary John Healey set out the proposals to update the nuclear deterrent.
We will commit £15 billion in investment into the Sovereign Warhead programme in this Parliament, supporting over 9,000 jobs. We will establish continuous submarine production through investments in Barrow and in Derby that will allow us to produce a submarine every 18 months, allowing us to grow our nuclear attack submarine fleet to up to 12 submarines, supporting more than 20,000 jobs. And on munitions, we will invest £6 billion in this Parliament, including for 6 new munitions factories and up to 7,000 new long-range weapons, supporting nearly 2,000 jobs.
Well, for our debate tonight, I spoke to Jim Townsend, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Defence of Europe and NATO, and Arnab Basu, Chief Executive and founder of Kromek Group plc, which is a specialist in nuclear technology, to talk about more of the changes to our nuclear deterrent. And Arnab began by explaining what the review suggests about global relations.
This is pretty significant from a UK's perspective, but also from the whole NATO perspective. But it also tells you the state where we are in the world today, that threats from nuclear weapons is credible, and you know the sort of adversaries and the threats that they pose are being taken very seriously. So from UK's perspective, this is all good news. This is, of course, going to be spent primarily on building up the deterrence against foreign adversaries. But it's also going to be, an important step towards building up the UK's resilience, particularly the industrial resilience in UK. So.
Britain's nuclear deterrent, the submarines, relies, doesn't it, on the United States actually providing the missiles?
Well, that's right. And I wanted just to first say that I agree with my colleague. This is something that's important for the UK and important for NATO. And we can talk about that in a minute, too. But the US-UK relationship, the special relationship, a lot of it kind of comes from this relationship that we've had on that nuclear side for many, many years. I think the US and UK depend on each other in terms of deployments, sharing deployments, and in terms of research and development. You mentioned the missiles, and there's other aspects, too, where we work together on it. And I think the UK Defence Industrial Base, this is, as my colleague mentioned, this is an important component because a lot of that is cutting edge work that they do. And it's important, I think, for the UK and the US to exchange information, to exchange, findings and latest research on these things, so that we can take advantage of technological breakthroughs and that type of thing. So this is important for both sides and for NATO.
Arnab, tell us a little bit about the 12 new submarines that the Prime Minister has announced that the UK is going to build, and this rapid timetable. He talked about producing one new submarine every 18 months when we know how slow defence procurement can be. Do you think that's realistic? And tell us a bit more about what role these submarines will play.
I think this is certainly ambitious, but also it points towards the fact that defence can be used as a real generator of economic growth and creation of jobs, while really focusing on national security and defence and keeping us safe, and also providing that deterrent in this increasingly volatile world that we are starting to live in. We have been building submarines for quite a while, so we know how to do these things. Doing it in scale is at the rate is, as I say, it's ambitious, but of course the expertise already exists, and it is again very good news for the industrial base that supports, because as we have seen, it is very important to keep the supply chain really reinvigorated in this, because ultimately, in today's world, having a robust, reliant, resilient supply chain, which is sovereign, and particularly taking Jim's point in there in terms of a lot of these technologies will be cutting edge technologies, innovation-led technologies, and really supporting innovation, really keeping ahead in the game against your enemies is going to be fantastic.
Well, just before I bring in Jim on this, I just want to be clear. These are new submarines that are going to be built in collaboration with the US and Australia under this AUKUS program. But are they just replacing some of these old Vanguard submarines that we've got?
These will be additional capabilities. So some of them, of course, will be replacing some of the older stock, but these will also be new capabilities that is brought on board.
Well, Jim, what do you make of this? Tell us a bit more about how you see the development of 12 new submarines.
Well, I think from a U.S. perspective, we're really happy to see it because we're having some issues with submarine manufacturing, if you will, submarine shipyards in the U.S. We only have one, really. And so we're also working, as you mentioned, AUKUS. We're working with the Australians and the UK to help the Australians have a submarine fleet that is run by nuclear energy. You know, it's something that they're not going to have atomic weapons on them, but they're going to be much more efficient in terms of how far they can go and for how long, et cetera. So, the UK doing what it's doing now in terms of investing in its submarine capacity, particularly the nuclear side, helps take the pressure off the U.S. And it shows the Russians and then anyone else, the Chinese or whoever the future may bring our way. It shows that we are keeping modern this nuclear deterrent. And deterrence is what it's all about. It's not about fighting a war. We're going to go out and use these submarines to conquer new lands or something like that. This is all to deter bad things from coming our way. And it's like insurance. It's like fire insurance. You don't wait to buy fire insurance when your house is already on fire. You buy this kind of insurance before that happens. And that's what this is happening in the UK and in the US. We're having to modernize the nuclear part of our deterrent.
Just before I go back to Arnab, I want to be clear, Jim, our nuclear deterrent here in Britain, it isn't really independent, is it? It relies on the US not just providing parts of the technology and the firepower, but actually giving us the go-ahead should we decide the terrible decision that we need to deploy them or even threaten to deploy them.
Well, I don't think that's the case. I think the UK is an independent sovereign nation, and this is an independent sovereign capability that the UK has. The dependency comes in terms of maybe some of the manufacturing technique, or as we talked about, the missile and that kind of thing. But I think in terms of its use, the terrible decision that might have to be made is not going to be have to have a green light from the United States. I think it's independent. Now, I say that I haven't had to answer a question like that, but maybe my colleague knows better. But I can't imagine the UK government would depend on someone else to give the green light before they can take an independent sovereign action.
Arnab, what about this idea, which does appear to be explored at least in the Defence Review, of actually putting nuclear weapons onto aircraft, which would be a completely new approach from the UK? Is that something that's being seriously considered now?
Look, this, as we heard, these are all part of the wider deterrent strategy and capability that is being built up. If you go back to the Cold War era, I mean, a lot of these capabilities was actually dismantled and decommissioned post the Cold War because we used to have some of these sort of capabilities, but now. We are again entering a different kind of era within the geopolitical sort of arena. And
so, is Britain going to go ahead and mount nuclear weapons on aircraft?
I think having that capability is absolutely the right strategy because ultimately it is not about going out and starting firing nuclear weapons. It is about deterrent. It is about having the capability. It is about being ready and prepared and be resilient in terms of and a real statement of intent and confidence from UK's perspective, but also.
But there's no firm decision on this yet, right?
No, as far as I can understand from the review, probably these are decisions that will be matured and ultimately get into its final form over the coming months, I believe.
Let me come back to you then, Jim, on that. It would be a significant move, wouldn't it, after many years when Britain has had its nuclear deterrent reliant on the 4 submarines, that one of which at least is in constant patrol around our waters. And I mean, just the other point on this, we've had decades of nuclear disarmament, an attempt to dial down the nuclear threat. Are you concerned that what is happening here in the UK and elsewhere means that has come to an end?
Well, I mean, that's a great question. And I've been involved in this since the Cold War days, even working on arms control back in the 80s. And it's, for me personally, it's very sad. I'm sorry to see this. We were so full of hope in the 1990s that whole era of the nuclear weapons and this type of thing that was getting under control. It was going away. We were entering into a new period. And obviously, it was short-lived. And here we are going back into a very dark place. And I think what we have to do is remember lessons learned and remember that to keep those bad, horrible decisions from having been made, as you pointed out earlier, we have to have a strong conventional military. We have to have a strong conventional military deterrent that keeps us away from having to make decisions about escalating to a nuclear side. I mean, that's an important point coming out of the Cold War was you need to have options during a conflict that don't involve nuclear weapons, that you never get to that place, that you're dependent on primarily conventional weapons for your deterrent. But if that breaks and you are faced with a nuclear threat, you need to be ready for that. And you need to be able to deter that so that your opposition knows that you're prepared to deliver to them a costly, unacceptable response should they do something. It's the old nuclear deterrent that we knew so well in the Cold War days. So we're getting back into that period, and I'm heartsick about it. But we have to face facts, and we have to make sure that we deter that.
So do you think we are moving now from a period of nuclear disarmament towards a new era of nuclear rearmament?
Well, I would say that we are moving to an area that's not necessarily rearmament in terms of an arms race, but I think what we're doing is modernizing what we already have, and we're making sure that it's credible. But I will say also that arms control is always possible. It was difficult back in the Cold War days to begin to have nuclear arms control talks because the Soviets and the West, the United States, didn't really trust one another. But we were able to work out processes where you can reach arms control, and we did. And I think we need to work towards an era where we start that back up. And I know the U.S. would be happy to do that, and Russia will have to see. But we have hope in the sense that we can always start that up when both sides are willing to do it. But until then, we have to keep our powder dry, as we say in the U.S. We have to keep modern our conventional and our nuclear capabilities, and deter.
Well, that was Jim Townsend, former US Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defence for Europe, speaking to me along with Arnab Basu, Chief Executive and founder of the Kromek Group, which is a specialist in nuclear technology.